The Scoundrels were baffled by S.C. Turnbo. One of the earliest settlers on Big Creek was Robert Casebolt. Now he settled on school land on the west side of the creek in Ozark County, Missouri. A fine spring of water run from the hill 150 yards north of the house, and he built a small hut for temporary use until he could better build a house which was 18 feet square. Then he added another house 16 by 18 feet, 10 feet south of the first house, now not the hut, but with the hall between, and made a porch on the west side of the last house built. Now, both buildings were constructed out of log. Mr. Casebolt was born in the state of Tennessee in 1811. His wife's name was Jemima, and was a daughter of Matthew and Lucinda Sims, and she was born in the state of Indiana in 1815. Her parents immigrated to Greene County, Missouri, when she was just a little child, and there was scarcely a settlement in that part of Missouri. Mr. Sims and his family camped a few days on the ground where the old part of the town of Springfield now stands. There was not an improvement of any sort there, and then it was a home of deer and wild turkey. Robert went from Tennessee to Greene County later, where there was time he met his future wife, Mrs. Jemima Sims, on the Sac River, a tributary of the Osage, and they were married on this stream in the early 30s. They lived in Missouri until 1836, and they moved to Marion County, Arkansas, and lived on the White River. They settled the bottom just below Bull Bottom, which was afterward known as the John Terry Place. Mr. Casebolt brought a fine yoke of steers with him, and during the following winter after his arrival here, he and his wife were clearing some land in the bottom, and a hackberry tree fell on one of the oxen and killed it. After leaving this bottom, they settled on Big Creek, where they made their home until after the commencement of the Civil War. The following are the names of some of the settlers who lived on the lower part of Big Creek from the time Mr. Casebolt went to Big Creek until the outbreak of the war. Bert McAfee lived on what is now the Sam Hollett Place, and Charlie Smith lived on the upper part of the Pate Duggins Place. Barry Morse lived on the opposite side of the creek from the Smiths, and there's Martin Johnson lived a while on the Smith Place. Jim McVeigh lived on what is now the Aaron Quick Place. Lewis Ramsey lived there after McVeigh left. Now, Ramsey had 3 sons named John, Walter, and Ebb, and a daughter named Mahala. Billy Howard and his 2 sons, Bill and Doss, settled the lower Aaron Quick farm. Matt Magnus and his 2 brothers, Bob and Teef, lived on what is now the Fately land. Matt Magnus married Huldah Millam, daughter of Belleff Millam. Teef married her sister, Sarah Ann Millam. Bob married Miss Susan Lance, daughter of Moss Lance. Wilshire Magnus, a brother of one of the Magnus boys, lived at the mouth of the Little Cedar Creek on what is now the Steve Copeland land. Wilshire married Mrs. Nancy Holt, daughter of Billy Holt. Fleming Clark and Peggy Clark, his wife, lived at the mouth of the creek. Ben Clark, son of Fleming, lived on the White River just below his father's place, and Jack Smith, a son-in-law of the Fleming Clarks, lived on the creek a short distance above the mouth. Mr. Casebolt and his wife reared a large family. The names of part of the children are as followed. Christina, their eldest, was born on the Sac River. Lucinda, their next eldest, was also born there. Jemima was the next oldest. She married Elisha Friend, son of Peter Friend. Mary Janes, their next oldest, was born in 1840, and she married Bill Trimble, son of Allen Trimble. Robert was born in 1841, and this child was 11 months old when his parents moved to Big Creek. Serena, Becca Ann, James F., and Sarah were born on Big Creek. Serena married Steve Friend, another son of Peter Friend. When Serena died, Steve married her sister Christina. Sarah married Win Yoakum, son of Asa Yoakum. Jemima and Serena both lie buried in the Asa Yoakum graveyard. Lucinda and Becca Ann died on the old Tom Brown farm just below the mouth of Trimble's Creek, and as we have said elsewhere, their bodies rest in the Trimble graveyard. James F. married Hollis, daughter of Bob Hollis. As we have already said, Mr. Casebolt and his family were true Southerners, fearless, and met all kinds of hardships and done their duty without wavering. Casebolt was a captain of a small company of men for a few months in 1862. The entire family suffered from deprivations of the thieves during the war, and they found it necessary to conceal as much of their provision and other things that were useful as could be done. Among the last named was an ox cart, the wheels which were banded with heavy iron tire, and Mrs. Casebolt and her daughters pulled and pushed the cart to the top of the hill west of the house and hid it in a thicket of brush. By some means word got out where the cart was concealed and its whereabouts, and was soon known over the neighborhood. One day 3 men rode up to the yard gate and stopped. 2 of them dismounted and went into the house to plunder and select articles of the household to carry off. The other man rode up toward the hill where the cart was hid, and in a few minutes Mrs. Casebolt and her daughters heard him pounding on the wheels to get the tire off. And Mrs. Casebolt remarked, "If that scoundrel ain't found the cart and is knocking the tire off, 2 of you girls go with me and we'll go see about it." And Jane and Lucinda stepped forward to go with her. Then turning to the other children, she says, "The rest of you stay here and keep them other 2 rascals from stealing what is in the house." But as soon as Mrs. Casebolt and the 2 girls left the house, the 2 men walked out of the house and mounted their horses and rode on by the women and hurried up the hill where their comrade was at work on the cart. And the 3 women, when they reached the spot where the cart was, the 3 men were there. The man had one tire off and had given it to the other men on the horseback, and he was holding it. One of the girls told him to give it up, but he refused to do it. "I will take it away from you," said she, as she took hold of it and attempted to pull it away from him, but he held on to it, and the other girl went to her aid, and with their combined strength they jerked the tire from him, which came near pulling him off the horse. The scene was exciting and degrading to the men, for they cursed and abused the women, and the latter called them thieves and robbers. The man on the ground tried to get the tire off the other wheel, and Mrs. Casebolt ordered him to quit and let the tire alone, but he cursed her and went on trying to take it off. Then she snatched up a rock and threatened to knock him down with it, but this didn't daunt him. At this moment he got the tire off, and it fell to the ground. But as he stooped over to pick up the tire, the woman snatched it up, hung both tires on one of the standards of the cart, and Mrs. Casebolt says, "Girls, let us take the cart to the house," and the 2 girls darted to the end of the tongue and raised it up and pulled it along, while their mother just walked behind the cart to guard the tire. While they were taking the cart and the tire down the hill into the house yard, the men followed them on their horses and abused the women in a scandalous manner and threatened to burn their house. When the women had pulled up and pushed the cart into the yard, the 3 men halted at the yard fence and went on their abuse in such a rough way and swearing that they were going to burn the house until Mrs. Casebolt determined that she would not bear it any longer, and she snatched up a stout club of wood, and Jane picked up a chopping axe. Mrs. Casebolt says, "The first man that dismounts from this horse, I will kill him." And Jane said, "The first man that crosses the fence into the yard, I'll chop him into pieces with this axe." The men now used the vilest language they could command with their tongues, but they dared not get off their horses. They were baffled. Directly 2 of them rode off, but the other man swore that he was not ready to go until he burned the house. Mrs. Casebolt says to him, "If you do not leave here at once, your dead body will be found in a hole of water in Big Creek." and the scoundrel, finding that he was outdone by the brave and honest women who were defending their home, started off and followed after his companions. The land on which the Casebolt lived is now known as the Ben Quick Farm. James Casebolt, a nephew of Robert Casebolt, settled on the Ed Quick Farm, which is just below there. Jake Casebolt, a brother of Robert's, lived on the Gasconade River in Pulaski County, Missouri. John Casebolt, another brother, lived on Findlay Creek 6 miles northeast of Sparta in Christian County. The most of the foregoing account was furnished me by James F. Casebolt, the youngest son of Robert Casebolt.